We've got Vindi Banga, we've got GK Pillai, we've got Govind Shrikande to take us through details of that big story really, and that's the big breaking news right now. There are easier norms for FDI and multi-brand retail, and will the top dollar come calling is really the big question. I want to take it first and foremost to GK Pillai, the former Commerce Secretary, a man who's also been the Home Secretary before, sir. FDI norms in retail have been revised. Will the top dollar flow in? Mr. GK Pillai.
Well, I don't think it's going to come in immediately, but in the long term, I put it between 18 months to 3 years, it is possible that a significant amount of FDI could come in the multi-brand retail.
All right, not significant amount of FDI will perhaps come in over the period of time. But, sir, very quickly, if I were to ask you, it's been a year since this sector was opened up. Last August, when I remember, is when 51% FDI and multi-brand retail was announced. Besides the stringent norms, hasn't the political repercussion and the retail ruckus around it really kept away global investors? Mr. Pillai?
Partly, but I think the multi-brand retail companies have been doing a lot of homework. They've been trying to see where they can get their stores opened, which are the cities where there's possibility of getting both land or buildings for which would suit them. So I think a lot of homework is being done by the multi-brand retail companies, and I think looking at the complexities of the Indian market, I think that element of time was necessary for them to understand the Indian situation.
Fair enough. They've got a year's time to understand really what was happening in India's landscape, and they've also got a sense of what's really happening in India. I'd like to showcase the guests we have. We've got GK Pillai, we've got Vindi Banga, and Govind Shrikande of Shoppers Stop, who's going to be joining us in moments from now. But Mr. Pillai, just to stay with you, many retailers still believe that despite the relaxation, the approach has been very, very piecemeal, so to say. It's taken the government 1 year to come out with explanations. There were many queries raised. It is a tough market to penetrate here in India. And some retailers also allege that the government doesn't really understand the business model of retail. That's really the big question. If I can ask you, do you agree with that view, and is that a fair accusation really?
I think the business model of retail is quite well understood, but I think there have been political implications of opening up multi-brand retail, and the government has been forced to compromise on some of the business aspects to get it politically acceptable. And I think we are finding that where political acceptability comes, perhaps the business model does not work there.
All right, let's get you the global voice on this show, and we've got Vindi Banga, the former chairman, of course, of Unilever joining us. Mr. Banga, mandatory sourcing restrictions have been relaxed and relaxed quite considerably for FDI and multi-brand retail. Issues like cities with only 1 million population have been addressed. The minimum back-end infrastructure has been addressed. Do you now expect the big retailers to set shop here?
You know, I think the whole issue around removing caps on FDI or allowing FDI is to make it simple. We have to avoid putting too many conditionalities. In the case of retail, we did put a lot of conditionalities, and when you talk to global retailers, they find those conditionalities very hard to actually cope with. It's simply not able to deliver, for example, 30% of their sourcing from small-scale sector. It's just not possible. So I think removing such conditionalities will certainly create a much better avenue for retailers to invest in India.
Rakesh Biyani, a big player in the Indian retail space, the joint managing director of Pantaloons Limited, joining me on the phone line right here on ET Now. Mr. Biyani, thanks very much for having your first word with us. But the cabinet has cleared and rather diluted the norms for multi-brand retail. The big question that everybody wants to know is, will this really attract the top dollar?
Well, I've just heard briefly about what the changes that have been announced, and I think conditionality has got to remain, but I think, my first reaction is that it's quite disappointing that, one of the reference points that the Retailers Association had shared with the government was to relook at this entire multiple brand-wise definition, and kind of focus on allowing retail investment across various other categories. because there are many retail formats where there is just no need for a back end, and it's all about the front end. I don't think so that's been done. Some relaxation always is going to help, but I think there are still many questions that need to be answered. And when you really think about the retail governance, is more about a state subject, and we kind of have not heard from any state in terms of what are they thinking about and how they are looking at taking retail forward in each of the states.
That's exactly the point that many retailers have raised, that this has been a very piecemeal approach, so to say. First came the policy last August, then of course many queries were raised, now it's coming in the explanation and the dilution. Do you believe it is inspiring confidence, if at all, in global retailers to put their money in? Because these were the very same points that were told and hard sold when they were trying to get retail in India, and now those same points are being diluted.
Well, I think conditionalities will always remain, and I think it's important that any retailer, whoever it be, local or international, must try and ensure the fact that we do maximum amount of sourcing within our country. And I'm not too worried about conditionality. I think it's about an overall approach and understanding of what is retail as a business, firstly. And I think somewhere that's kind of lacking out here, and thus rather than kind of starting up from a fresh mind, we are kind of continuing to tweak an existing policy document, which does not seem to be understood by at least the retail industry.
I want to take it across to Arvind Singhal, a man who knows all about retail. He's joining me right here on ET Now. Thanks very much, Mr. Singhal. The norms have been considerably diluted, but you don't seem to be very impressed.
No, unfortunately, no. I think like Rakesh has also just said, notwithstanding what Mr. Pillai's view is about the compromises required on the account of political realities, the fact of the matter is, in this case, there is a policy which is absolutely infeasible to implement. It would have been better if India had remained completely averse to any FDI in retail. At least there we had a philosophical stand that we don't want foreign retail investment. Here we have a situation where we have actually, on one side, the government has staked its credibility in the parliament, its existence in the parliament. On the other side, the policy which is there, we only talk about Walmart and Tesco. They are not the only retailers in the world. There's a very, very large universe of retailers which go well beyond Walmart and Tesco. And like Rakesh said just now, a lot of retail business do not require investment in the back end. They require investment only in the front end. At the same time, even the limitation when we talk about from $1 million to $2 million in sourcing in terms of small and medium scale, try to answer this question for me. If somebody is a retailer in consumer electronics, which company in the world actually has an investment of $1 million or $2 million? Look into pharmaceutical retailing. What kind of a sourcing can be done, from small and medium scale in this case? Mr. Rajnath Singh of BJP has very recently reiterated his party's stand that they are completely averse to foreign investment in retailing. Under this environment, I think, we can keep on going back to the cabinet, we can keep on going back to various stakeholders in terms of discussions. I really don't think any investment is going to come in as far as retail is concerned, and especially as the so-called multi-brand retail is concerned.
I want to get in Ajay Dua into this debate. Thanks very much for being with us on ET Now. The norms have been diluted, but my panel doesn't seem to share the optimism that the top dollar will flow in.
Supriya, I don't get you fully. I think some audio.
I'm saying the norms have been diluted. The norms have been diluted, sir. But it doesn't seem to have emanated the optimism that the top retailers are really making a beeline for India. They don't seem to be very convinced with what we are doing, despite dilution of norms, because it seems to be very piecemeal. Do you not agree with us?
No, I do. I'm not surprised about the reaction. The muted reaction which we have received, which some of the panelists have come out with. After all, these are clarifications which are being given, clarifications which could have been the issues which could have been thought about when they were imposed in the first instance. We didn't do that because at that point of time, we were rather concerned about the strong vocal opposition, political as well as from the traders. Since then, probably the requirement for FDI has increased, and that is why we have revisited the issue. To my mind, the enthusiasm not being of the order which it should have been is probably because all the changes which have been made are certainly material, but the investors feel that these will probably need time for government to notify, and probably if they go by way of rules and regulations under the FEMA, then these will have to be reported to the Parliament, and these may or may not pass muster in the Parliament, and to that extent the changes which have been made today will remain as proposals rather than as effective decisions of the government.
Govind, let me bring this to you before I take it across to others on the panel. You are really the player in there. The 50% of $100 million investment in back-end infrastructure vis-a-vis the earlier norm of all investments, half of that in back-end infrastructure. You think tweaking these norms will really attract the foreign dollar in your sector?
I'm still apprehensive, as I mentioned, that one of the key clarifications that came in between was completely related to the fact that they couldn't acquire any existing company. Now, every one of the players actually has active or inactive association with an Indian company, those who are interested to come into India. And if that active or inactive association is not going to get recognized for a takeover or a buyout or a JV, I think there's a big problem or a big hurdle for all these companies. So I still see that there are challenges in the clarifications, and those need to be really clarified completely so that the international investor clearly understands what he is going to be up to.
You're saying there's an active and an inactive partnership there is in the place, Mr. Shrikande, which is why my question, norms have been relaxed. Will you expect deals to take off in this sector? Will you expect partnerships to take off really, because FDI norms were allowed last year? They have now been diluted. Do we see foreign investment being attracted via deals in this sector?
We'll have to have much more clarity and much more relaxation if you really want them to come in. Otherwise, the current FDI policy actually says, without stating it, please don't come.